Creative Katie, Karen Burchill here. Welcome to my channel and a napkin journal tutorial. This one's great for beginners. Here is a sneak peek of the finished page. I'm using a collage sheet that I printed off using Japanese font, and I just printed this out on copy paper. Now, as my substrate, I'm using an art journal page from my repurposed recipe binder. And there's a whole video about how I selected it. So I'm just using my matte liquid medium and gluing this Japanese font sheet right down on top of it, and then just cutting it off and then making sure that that is completely dry. Now, the reason I'm putting the font underneath it is because I want to see that peeking through the napkin. And you can see, so whatever's underneath, I want it to shine through. Now, when you are wanting to do this technique, what you want to do is select napkins that have a lot of open space or white space. So here it's kind of an off-white color, like this one. And you'll see when you look at the different napkins, some have a lot of open space. They're going to be particularly good. Now this one, it's a lovely napkin and you're going to see me create with it, but it has some script behind it. It has some pattern. The artist, the designer has already put that in, which while it would work for this technique, it's kind of a waste because I'm not cutting out all the parts of the napkin like you see. I'm going to be just decoupaging the entire napkin on top. So these are some sentiment collage papers that come with my sentiment packs. You could be putting it on book paper, you could be putting it on music paper. But the key here is when selecting a napkins to showcase this technique the best, you want that clear, open, white space. So now that this is partially dry, what I'm going to do is decoupage the napkin, the whole napkin. I'm not cutting out any pieces like you've seen me do with a water brush going around. I'm going to just decoupage the whole thing. And that is going to, the background color here is kind of that off-white. So it's going to colorize my entire page, which means I don't have to. And two, it adds this really amazing texture. Now I'm getting a few wrinkles in here and I'm okay with that because I love that texture and it's happening all in this one process. I'm colorizing, I've got texture, which means I don't have to do all those other techniques on this. Now I could go and paint more on that background if I wanted to change that color. But I've kept this rather minimal. It's a good beginner video. Now, as I'm drawing this, I'm noticing that the font is showing up a lot underneath the flowers. And while I'm cutting this out, I'm thinking, do I like that? Do I, and I could have painted white gesso on top of the font where the flowers were to minimize that, but of course I didn't. So while I didn't like how much font was showing through, and again, that's personal taste. If you like it, you can leave it. But I just wanted a little bit of that knocked back. So what I did is I just grabbed a small brush and I looked through my paints to get colors that I thought were fairly close to what the designer had put into the napkin, and I'm just doing very roughly a painterly effect on these flowers. Now this tulip down here kind of became a bit of a mess. I didn't do the best job. The color I initially chose wasn't quite the right shade. I did figure it out as I went on, but I was able to save it. So stick with me. So I'm just kind of colorizing this. Now remember, there was a coat of gel medium or gel, not gel medium, liquid matte medium on top of this. So it's not absorbing into the napkin. And I do have some playtime to lift the color if I inadvertently put in the wrong space. So I'm just dabbing here very painterly. My goal is not even to paint every part of it. I'm just adding a little bit of paint. This is serving the purpose of knocking back that Japanese font that is behind the flowers. And I'm also taking some liberties and adding a few things where I think it needs it to balance out the composition. So by the time I got to this top tulip, this one went much faster and much easier, and I did a better job, I think, than the first one. It's a learning process. So there I dropped some paint right onto it, and here's where having it coated with that matte medium really helped because I was able to lift that right off and it didn't even stain the paper. So I'm just deepening the colors here, making them stand out a little bit more from the background. Now I have an entire pack of this napkin because I loved it so much. So you will see other projects using the same napkin. So it'll give you a variety of maybe different techniques and different uses. So if you do have a pack of napkins, what can you do with it? I'm just kind of dabbing. Now I'm adding a little bit of white gesso, and that's just adding a little more texture, pushing back that Japanese font a little bit more. It's also adding some highlights and lowlights. I'm just dabbing into the white gesso, into the colored paints. So if you're not following me on Instagram, please go over to Instagram and follow me at Creative Katie. I said I post there. Um, Sometimes the art journal pages and mixed media pieces I post and I show you what I'm up to long before they become YouTube videos. So the bottom tulip, I think there was a little too much paint. There was the wrong shade. So I'm trying to add some highlights and, shading to make those petals stand out because I lost all that because I put too much on there. So while I'm not happy with it, I'm still not quite sure how to fix it. But you know me, I don't give up, and neither should you. I am mixing quinacridone magenta, alizarin crimson. Now I'm looking back on the napkin at the shading that the artist had, and I'm using that as a guide for replacing it. And I'm using the floating acrylic technique here and just adding some highlights, and that's bringing out the petals and giving some definition to it. And I'm much happier with this tulip now. Like you can see, that just totally made that petal pop. Is it exactly the same as what was on the napkin? Probably not, but it looks more like a tulip now than it did before the highlights were added. So now I'm adding some white here and just building up the colors and the look of my focal image. And I keep looking back. Now, if you were painting this from scratch, you could be looking at a stock photo from Pinterest. And I'm just tweaking it till it looks good in my eyes. So this is a bit of a dance. I decided I needed to white out some more of that text because it was confusing. It didn't seem like it belonged. Now I didn't colorize the background, the open space. I like the soft off-white color that it was as it was. So I chose not to do that. Although it may have looked nice to have done a um, light tint with burnt umber, and it would just give it that golden brown aged look, maybe a little deeper. I'm adding some shading here. I struggled with getting the right color. Black looked too stark. Blue didn't seem to work. And I find by painting over, whether it's a coloring sheet or a napkin, I'm improving my skills of, an observation of how a petal looks. Here is a side by side of the napkin, and then once I've painted, and you can see the difference in tone, the difference in color, and how it made it look when it was actually decoupaged down on the sheet, because it changed the coloring of the napkin somewhat too once it became more opaque. Just using a makeup sponge with black acrylic paint and shading around the edges. And I don't know if you can see the texture from that napkin, but it is not perfectly smooth. Now I'm playing with the font, and initially I have another Japanese looking font. It's in English, it, but I thought that was too much, and I wanted some bold letters, and I did not want the Japanese font to show through, so I didn't put it on clear or tissue paper. I put it on plain copy paper, and I'm just gluing that down with my fluid matte medium again. Now the white just seemed a little bit too white, so I came back and I just did a wash with gold. Now in the background it's kind of off-white, a little bit of yellow, so I thought that worked really well. And once I do the next step, which is splattering with gold, it all ties in together. Now when you colorize copy paper, after it's been printed with the font, that will knock back or the boldness of the black. So you're going to lose some of the black. So what I do is I come back with my Secura glaze pen and I go over the letters to make them stand out. And the glaze pen is perfect because it's dimensional and it's shiny. So it adds even more to the page. And I will put a link to it in my Amazon links down below. So I splattered with gold, and off camera you can see here that I've done the letters with the Secura jelly glaze pen, and I'm just putting a black border again with my Secura glaze black around the edge, and that really finished it off. It needed just that little bit more, that edging, that finish. If you're looking for napkins or TCW stencils, you can go to Ninny's Napkins. There's some discount codes and affiliate links in the description box below. So now I'm just putting it back into my recipe binder, and I match it so that I've got similar colors. And here are the close-ups of the finished page. I absolutely love it. It's a simple project, whether you're a beginner or not. If you only have a little bit of time, this is the perfect one to kind of do. Stay tuned for more napkin journals and more using this napkin. Thanks for joining me. Give me a like, leave me a comment. Bye.